What's goody, everyone? Last time, I counted down my top 20 favorite Futurama episodes, which I sincerely hope you check out as I worked really hard on it for a month or so. Link is in the description below. Anyways, it's time to get back into the swing of video game reviews, and like with my first one, I'm continuing down the line of games I've Let's Played. So this time, we're looking at Sonic Adventure. More specifically, we're looking at the version of the game that I and most people probably grew up with, Sonic Adventure DX Director's Cut on the Nintendo GameCube.
It was 2004, and I had just spent the last year since Christmas obsessively playing the games on the GameCube that I had gotten up to this point. I was super into Sonic Adventure 2, but not at the point of progressing far in it yet since I was still really young. During the summer, I went out for a walk down the avenue with my grandmother to go shopping. Eventually, I was rewarded by bearing with her shopping and numerous conversations with others with a trip to our local KB Toys. Yeah, remember KB Toys? Sure, Toys R Us was the shit, but there were certain toys and games you could only get at KB Toys, so going to one was always a good time.
It's where I get most of my Godzilla figures too, but I'm getting a bit off topic.
So I walk into KB Toys and go right to my favorite toys section. I don't find anything interesting, so we go to leave, but before we do, I glance up at the counter and see an unfamiliar Sonic game. At that moment, time stood still. I look up and say that I don't have that one and I've never seen it before. My grandma decides to buy it for me, and I am treated to the next several years of playing through both Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, trying to beat both of them at the same time.
So I want to say thank you to my grandma, who I hope isn't watching this video for obvious reasons, so just know that your money was well spent, as Sonic Adventure DX would become one of my most played and most beloved GameCube titles ever, and really one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. Oh yeah! This is happening! This is my review of Sonic Adventure DX.
So, Sonic the Hedgehog? Have you heard of him? Okay, I'm not gonna explain his history to you because I'm sure you're pretty aware if you clicked this video. But Sonic up until now is predominantly the star of a series of 2D platformers. During the late 90s, his console rival Mario would make the transition into 3D. With Mario 64 proving successful, many other 3D platformers would pop up, some like Crash Bandicoot immediately gaining legendary status.
I mean, anything called Sonic's ass game in development deserves legendary status, but I digress.
So with 3D platformers now becoming the new hit thing, it was only a matter of time for Sega and Sonic Team to allow Sonic to make the transition as well. Seems like a slam dunk, right? It wasn't. Sonic's developers tried to build a Sonic game for their new console, the Sega Saturn, which had the processing power for a 3D Sonic game. This game, that never saw the light of day, was forever known as Sonic Extreme. What we know of the game is that it would feature a 3D Sonic going through a fully 3D environment as the camera follows him from a sort of fisheye lens. It eventually made its way to E3 in 1996, leading up to what would have been a holiday release that year. Due to issues between Sega of America and Japan, major delays, the creator of the game's engine contracting pneumonia, among other issues, the game was eventually cancelled, and all we were left with are these unused promo materials and demos.
Now, we never know what we actually would have received if the game made its release. Would it have been good? Who knows? But in my opinion, it didn't look very promising.
After Extreme's cancellation, the Sega Saturn would fail, leaving Sega and Sonic Team to change course with their plans for the next Sonic title. They conceived an idea for a Sonic RPG for their new console, the Sega Dreamcast. At a certain point, that game would morph into what we now know as Sonic Adventure. Sonic characters playing as we know them in 2D in 3D with more of a focus on story, a trend that would continue in many games following it. Sonic Adventure on the Dreamcast was a substantial success, and while it hasn't aged the best, many Sonic fans consider it to be the peak of Sonic's 3D career.
Of course, as you know, I grew up with the DX port on the GameCube, and after the Dreamcast, Sega stopped making consoles altogether, and actually started releasing games on Nintendo consoles.
Now this game puts you in control of 6 Sonic characters, 4 pre-existing and 2 brand new. So in order to make sure they each get the proper attention in this review, I'll be talking about each one individually, their gameplay, story, and anything else I want to note. So the game begins with Sonic, of course, and instead of just jumping into the first level like a Sonic game normally would, we get a cutscene seeing our blue blur do what he does best, running fast and making quips.
Oh yeah! This is happening!
Did I mention this game came out in the 90s?
Sonic notices the world's worst driving policemen on their way downtown and gives chase. At the town hall, a creature made of water materializes and we see actual policemen firing bullets at the creature, which obviously don't work, especially because they missed that big brain of his. Sonic steps up to the plate and bonks the creature 3 times in said brain before the big drip slips away down a nearby drain. Dr. Robotnik appears overhead unbeknownst to Sonic, ominously warning him that he knows nothing.
Apparently Robotnik is played by a puppet in this game. I'm joking, of course, but as we'll see, the animations of the characters speaking has not aged well in the slightest.
The next day, Sonic wakes up from a nap at the local hotel and sees his buddy Tails crash his plane on the Emerald Coast. You would think that the level would start right away there, but for the first time ever, Sonic has hub worlds. Once the cutscene ends, these crude-looking women in bathing suits appear and you realize you can talk to them. Most people that play this game tend to ignore these NPCs, but I actually think they're a nice touch to the world. I mean, sure, they don't do much in the grand scheme of things, but they provide some context for the world you inhabit, and most even give you advice on how to progress. This kid creeps the fuck out of me. Mr. Know-It-All. Look at the way his hands wave around. It's like he's being controlled by some demonic puppet master.
Pull the string! Pull the string!
Also, as a kid, I had this irrational fear that this newsstand lady was stuck behind this counter forever. Made me quite sad, actually. But I'm getting a bit off topic. Sonic enters Emerald Coast, his first stage, which gets us right into this gameplay and one of the most iconic parts of this game. So Sonic controls pretty close to how you'd expect him to transition into 3D. He can reach really high speeds, but even though it takes a bit to reach those speeds, it all feels natural. He doesn't stay super slow and just knocks up the speed. It's gradual, and I like it that way. The spin dash is also present, and what I love about it is that you can match B to do it quickly on a whim and don't have to come to a complete stop. Sonic has another move called the homing attack, which is exactly how it sounds. He gets a mid-air dash if you hit the A button after you jump, and if a ring box, spring, or enemy is nearby, Sonic will dash right into it. I love the homing attack. I think it was a necessary addition because jumping on enemies was such a satisfying thing to do in 2D Sonic, but obviously this would be more difficult to do in 3D, so the homing attack provides an equally satisfying maneuver to compensate. Sonic's jumps are also a bit floaty here, but I think as the first 3D game, it gives the player an easier time to be precise with platforming.
So yeah, Sonic controls fantastic in this game to me, but does he have good levels to play in?
The answer is also yes. I think Sonic's levels are pretty well designed for the most part, but let's not get too far ahead here. Emerald Coast is the perfect first level because it's not super elaborate. It gives you that calm feeling of the beach with a little familiarity with the badniks like coconuts reappearing. While these stages technically are only one of one in this game instead of having multiple acts, they actually have several different phases. You got the more sandy, beachy area in the beginning, but you get to a more fast-paced part of the level at the halfway point, right after the iconic killer whale sequence, which never gave me problems as a kid, but as the years go by, it always shorts out on me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, this game can be very glitchy.
Sometimes Sonic will bump into the wall at really high speeds and it can throw off your whole runs because it's pretty much out of your control. It doesn't appear much in Emerald Coast, but as we go along it'll rear its head up again. So yeah, Emerald Coast is a great starting level for Sonic. It even has your standard Sonic goodies if you decide to go off the beaten path. I really have no complaints here, it's a fun starting point for this game. At the end we meet up with Tails and bring him back to Station Square, one of the 3 hub worlds of the game. Tails and Sonic have this interesting conversation about how Tails has been trying to test his new plane with a Chaos Emerald as a power supply to prove he can do things all by himself without Sonic. I say interesting because the dialogue, especially in Sonic's story, seems a little stilted. They had every character's story feature different takes for each line if the stories overlap, and you get the sense that the ones in Sonic's story were the first few takes.
Why not use it to power my plane? Supercharge!
So Tails says we gotta go to his workshop to check his stuff out there, and in order to travel between hub worlds, we gotta take the train.
But shouldn't Sonic be fast enough to just run there? Shh, just go with it. The game needs to load.
So we take a train to the Mystic Ruins with a pretty neat theme that I originally didn't like much due to the knocking. We head to Tails' workshop where we're ambushed by a giant talking egg. Dr. Robotnik appears, now mockingly called Eggman by Sonic and Tails, which was Sonic Team's way of transitioning Robotnik's name to his Japanese name, which has always been Eggman. Robotnik attacks them for the Chaos Emerald with the first of his boss creations, the Egg Hornet. It's a pretty easy boss that you could end quickly with Sonic if you know how to. A standard first Robotnik boss, even in 3D, but to be honest, I find it a bit boring. After Robotnik is defeated, he somehow is able to yank away Tails' emerald and he uses the Force to hold it out in front of him. He calls for Chaos, not the wrestling faction, but rather the liquid creature Sonic battled the night before. Robotnik reveals that he is working with Chaos, and by feeding it emeralds, it will grow larger and more powerful. I always liked how the emeralds add bone structure because it adds a slight unnerving factor to the beast. Robotnik flashbangs the fuck out of there, and Sonic and Tails make it their mission to collect the emeralds before he does. And for some reason, the game makes the mistake of not really letting you know directly where the next level is. Since we were interrupted before we got to explore Tails' workshop, how would we know that this statue isn't supposed to be here?
As a kid, I was actually stuck here for quite a bit because I had no idea.
But thankfully, the game provides you with the precursor to Omochao in the form of this weird red ball of light. While you can talk to NPCs for some help, this red ball spells it out for you directly, except sometimes when it's just a little vague.
Tails' workshop should be around here somewhere.
Even still, I'd love a ball of light to let me know what to do next.
Hello, I'm here to help.
Okay, great. What should I do next?
You must find and defeat Chaos.
Oh, you mean in the game? Well, yeah, I'm reviewing it right now. I mean, what should I do with myself next?
Chaos is among us. I will only be here to help in defeating Chaos.
Okay, great. Stick around, I guess. That was weird. What's goody guys, it's Jay Ruff and I hope you're enjoying this video. Remember that you can become a member for only $4.99 a month to get exclusive content, like my complete Let's Play of Sonic Origins as Tails and Knuckles. In addition, you'll also get bonus privileges like special badges, updates on projects, special recognition, and so on. Also tune into my live streams every Tuesday at 2 PM Eastern and Thursday at 2:30 PM Eastern. You can also send in a super chat, super sticker, and or super thanks to help out the channel. Make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell as well for updates on new content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and let's get back to the show.
After taking this Windstone to the Wind Tunnel, you are sent to the second level for Sonic, Windy Valley. I feel like Windy Valley takes what worked in Emerald Coast and turns it up even higher. I remember each section being pretty fun. We have the calm opening, the Wizard of Oz tornado section, and the wide open skies of the ending. However, this level will have you banging into the walls a lot more, yet it surprisingly doesn't bother me much here because I just love how the speed feels. Emerald Coast was a bit more confined, but this stage just lets you go for it. I also like the concept of being carried by the wind with your speed, but it sure scared the crap out of young Jay Ruff when the platform just ended. After we end that stage by collecting an emerald, we are signaled by the train man's voice that we should head back to Station Square. In Station Square, we can now head to the other side of the city where we can head down the sewers and find our first permanent power-up. You see, while we still have temporary power-ups like the returning speed shoes, invincibility, and shields, we can also find power-ups that stay with us for the entire game once found. We gain access to the Lightspeed Dash, which allows us to glide across a straight line of rings when we charge up Sonic's Spin Dash. However, it takes an absurd amount of time to charge up at base, so before you do anything, go back to the hotel and get the ring power-up to dramatically decrease the length of time. Once we've gotten our power-ups, we can now access the casino, a staple of Sonic games now brought into 3D. However, unlike the stages before it, this one is more open-ended on how you complete it. You see, the Chaos Emerald is actually there at the start. You simply need to earn enough rings to pay for it. You gain rings by literally playing the 2 slots that you can enter at any time in the lobby. The first slot is a classic Sonic slot where you have to line up the pictures of characters. Fuck, I keep getting Robotnik. The second is a Knights theme slot in reference to Sega's other popular franchise of the same name. I actually like this one a lot more because instead of matching up slots, you match cards together, which I find a lot easier, especially when you unlock the hidden room where you can just go nuts with it. I enjoy it a lot more, but honestly I think the controls in general for the slots are pretty lackluster. If I want to get rings, it's much easier to simply lose 3 times without getting a lot of rings in the slots and head to the garbage dump underneath the casino. It's funny that for doing so bad, they literally take you out with the trash. This is the platforming section for this level, and while short, it's very memorable and comes with a bitchin' music track. You can also easily get half as many rings as you need in order to get the emerald. Once the emerald is collected, we're ambushed once again by Robotnik, and after all the work, the fucker just takes it from us. Dude literally gasses us. Thankfully, the game shows us where the next stone is to get into the next stage in the Mystic Ruins. Oh shit, look, it's Cream! Oh my god, Cream, 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 it's Cream!
Since Sonic Advance 2 is my first game ever, this blew my mind as a kid, as Cream was the only character I could easily beat the game with at the time. Just another reason to love the export.
Convenient wall breaking allows us to make our way into the next stage, and since we are technically now on Angel Island, we can head to the returning Ice Cap Zone. I love when Sonic games bring back stages if it feels natural, not when it's just forced to get people to buy the game. Sonic Forces and Frontiers! However, much like Ice Cap in Sonic 3, this stage is just fine. In the early parts, it's a little closed and boxed in. You don't really have room to go fast, it's mostly very platformer heavy. I like the icicles that you have to jump from though. It's a neat concept that they surprisingly have never brought back in any fashion. Thankfully, near the end of the stage, it kicks into high gears. We get a good old-fashioned avalanche. This easily is the most fun part of the stage, and it totally makes up for the area beforehand being a bit slow and plodding. I wish we had more sections like this in the game, but I think they use it enough here to keep me satisfied. At the end of the level, we find another emerald, but before we can celebrate, we run into an old friend. Enter Knuckles, who much like his debut, immediately goes to attack us for our emeralds. We then get into one of the game's few character fights, and to put it bluntly, these are the worst parts of the game.
Yeah, I know that's a bit harsh, but they're an absolute joke. You can win by putting no effort into it at all.
It only takes 3 hits to beat Knuckles, and he barely moves in a way that would be challenging to fight. It ends so quickly, you wonder why it was even there in the first place. At least the theme is cool. If you could only only actually listen to all of it here. So after that pitiful exchange, the emeralds come flying out, and, you guessed it, Robotnik is here to grab them up. He reveals that he tricked Knuckles once again into thinking Sonic was after the Master Emerald. Now, I'm not sure if it's because I've seen it so many times, but this exchange is always funny to me, even if it's voice acted a little strange.
Chaos!
So the two emerald holding Chaos appears, looking like a walking hammerhead shark. He eats the emeralds and goes full Sharknado on us, tossing us into the lake where we can only fight him in the water. This boss is also pretty slow and plodding, where you're just waiting for Chaos to pop out of the water and it really takes forever. Also, I really don't get why we can briefly walk on water here. I mean, why not just let us fall into the water and make that another layer of difficulty, trying not to drown. You can't stand on the water for long though, or you'll get hurt by sinking a bit, but
That just raises further questions!
you're gonna grow to dislike this boss. Out of all of them, it's probably the worst in the game, and you'll see why later. When we defeat Chaos again, Robotnik reveals the Egg Carrier, his floating fortress for this game, where he then escapes to. Knuckles says, "Peace out, bitches," and Sonic and Tails go after the Egg Carrier and Sonic's plane, the Tornado. In and out the Sky Chase Zone from Sonic 2. I mean, the segment here is literally called Sky Chase, although this time you actually pilot the ship and fire bullets and lasers to shoot down the ship's defenses. This is the first of this game's sub-games, which are sort of mini-games that tend to control different from the standard gameplay. You're controlled on a track, only being able to move around the set path the game has for you. You can rapidly press B to shoot bullets, or hold down the B button to lock onto targets. Ultimately, you really don't have to shoot down anything, just survive and make it to the end. These segments are kind of boring. I don't find them to be that fun. I do like using the lock-on to get as many ships as possible, but it's pretty pointless. It's honestly just there. At the end, Robotnik fires his laser and shoots us down, splitting up Sonic and Tails for the time being. Sonic falls from a crazy height and lands back at the beach in Station Square, somehow completely unharmed.
I call murder on that!
Sonic putzes about until he runs into Amy Rose, the now redesigned hedgehog girl that was obsessed with him in Sonic CD. She asks him to protect this flicky bird she's with, and she tags along for a bit. This is until the thing that we're protecting them from, Zero, a Robotnik created by Robotnik, appears, and Amy persuades us to lose it in the next level, Twinkle Park, because
It says, you touched it and freeze. Let's go.
contrary to my bewilderment on how we get here, this actually is probably my favorite stage in the game. It starts you out in what I can only describe as a galaxy-brained go-kart ride, where you literally ride a hovercraft down an awesome racetrack in the middle of what appears to be space. It doesn't really control that great, but the atmosphere here with the music and Sonic's absolute jubilation just puts a smile on my face that I'm willing to disregard some obvious flaws. If that wasn't cool enough, at the end of this section you're launched into a literal rocket-powered roller coaster that just gets you fired up for a pretty unique level. You climb across tall buildings in the starlit sky, play bowling with your spin dash, and find some weird badniks. Again, another awesome song plays, and while I usually dislike stages where you can fall off and have to make your way back up the level, I really don't mind it here because I love this level so much I don't care about having to spend a while here. And honestly, it never usually takes me a while. I really love it here. The stage ends with a classic capsule holding some animals to release. We exit the level with no sight of Amy, so we could look around and try to find her, or we could go to Twinkle Circuit and have some more fun there.
Okay, I know I shouldn't, but they give you the option to play this sub-game right after you beat the level, so why not?
It's a fun distraction, I guess, and every character can gain access to it, each one having their own unique hover car with controls. After messing around in the circuit, we receive a random card that falls from the sky that allows us to get to another one of my favorite stages, Speed Highway. A level that lives up to its name because this stage is where you get to experience the true supersonic speed as he runs through the greater Station Square area at night. I think this level combines the 3D platforming elements pretty well with the high-speed nature of Sonic. You are thrust to unique building structures and rooftops with several different set pieces connecting them all. There are even areas that you can reach you wouldn't even expect if you play your cards right. Not much more to say with this level. It's the perfect 3D Sonic level, the quintessential level of the game. I just like Twinkle Park slightly more. This is mostly due to this level's last segment, which honestly seems entirely pointless for Sonic to travel through. It's clearly not built for him, which brings up a legit criticism I have with the level design of this game. Since all the characters share all the levels with different gameplay styles, there are some that just stick out like a sore thumb and don't feel like they were built for each character in mind. Sonic doesn't belong here, and it feels a bit forced. It's not a huge deal, especially when you get to hear one of the best themes in the game for a few seconds, but it's a problem that honestly makes me favor the sequel more. But that's for another day. day. After running through the city, we still can't find Amy until we see Zero taking her through the train tunnels. Somehow the train doesn't crash into them horrifically and we cut them off at the Mystic Ruins, only for the egg carrier to show up and take them away. We head to Angel Island again, where we find the Ancient Light, a power-up that allows us to use the same method of building up our Lightspeed dash to attack enemies in succession. This allows us to destroy the monkey guard, blocking us from getting to the next level, Red Mountain.
Seriously, Robotnik? A monkey? Like, a monkey is gonna keep me from getting anywhere. Oh, shit, bro!
Red Mountain is again one of my favorite stages in the game. It's so wide open and we truly get the full extent of what 3D Sonic can bring us in gameplay. Plus, mountainous areas aren't in many Sonic games to my knowledge, only Hilltop Zone comes to mind, and it's a stage I love immensely. You go through this whole weird mining operation while the music makes you feel like you're on this grand adventure. Riding zip lines and getting sprung over large areas of mountainous terrain is loads of fun, and it gets even more fun when you dive into the mountain itself and you get into this underground volcanic area. The music somehow gets even better as this chaotic theme with yelling and cheering plays like a demonic guitar rave. Look, there are even weird guys in the prison cages. What the hell is that about? Anyways, this is a slower part of the level, but I honestly like this change of pace here, and the level provides obstacles that I don't find annoying to get around and avoid. They actually are fun to move through, and getting through the level without getting hit is a satisfying thing to pull off. Also, look at the cute smiling cactus guys. Teehee. At the end of the level, Tails shows up in his fully complete plane powered by a Chaos Emerald. We go after the egg carrier once more in Sky Chase Act 2, which is much of the same, although now Tails switches into battle mode and we take the egg carrier head on, disabling its big fuck you laser. Now we can board, except the genius Fox Boy forgot to put in the landing gear, so we get to see the worst looking crash in a video game, where the plane just clips into the ship. Now we're on our third and final hub world, the egg carrier, which is cool with its sick theme, but I really wish there was more to it than what we get. It's cool to walk around and see all the weird areas Robotnik's put in, like a swimming pool, but overall I always felt like there should be more. There are funny game rooms that Robotnik has hidden there that contain emblems, this game's reward for completing objectives, that you can sometimes find lying around, but I couldn't get into them in this version of the game. Strange. Robotnik tells us over a loudspeaker to get a load of this, and the egg carrier transforms like Optimus Prime. Then we get this funny interaction where Sonic completely clowns Tails, and I honestly wish we had more of that, but I suppose it was a bit hard to implement with the lack of emotion on these characters at this stage of 3D Sonic's life. Next up is what I consider to be one of the worst levels in 3D Sonic, Sky Deck. I hate this place. It's the glitchiest level in the game, and each of its segments blow. The first one, I find the homing attack to be a bit off, and I plummet to the ground numerous times. The camera in these parts where I have to jump off these pillars I'm clinging to doesn't give me a great view to stop myself from jumping to my death. There are some areas like these ramps that just seem pointless, and there's quite a few areas in this level that seem to be there to extend the time of the level. The music, hilariously referred to as Sky Deck A Go-Go, is probably the only saving grace of this level, but it drags on forever. The second section is way worse due to the wind just blowing you all over the place.
See, I told you it blew.
Like, I get that they want you to hold on for dear life when the wind blows, but there are areas where that's near impossible, and it doesn't send me flying off to my death as it stops me from getting past the onslaught of bullshit that's out to kill you here. Even when you make it to the end of this section, you still have to shoot down this cannon with a million other cannons firing at you at once. And somehow it gets worse. The final section inside is such a glitchy mess because the gravity shifts the entire time. It's also another level where if you fall, you gotta do parts of the level over again, and this means the game has to revert its gravity back to how it was in the previous section you've now fallen into. Several times the game will just not be able to catch up quick enough, even when it's progressing through the level the right way. I mean, what's going on here? That's why I try skipping this section with a well-timed jump, but I couldn't get it done this time around, so bully for me, I guess.
Bully! Bully! Yes, bully!
Once that agonizing marathon of a level finishes, we're inside the egg carrier. But don't get comfortable, even though that robot maid do be looking kinda fresh though, because we immediately gotta go back outside to confront Robotnik, who has Amy, but it's too late. He snatches the bird from Amy and gets the Chaos Emerald it has possession of and fucks off, leaving his robot E-102 Gamma to hold us off. This induces another awful character battle with Gamma booping and beeping every time we effortlessly hit him. After we have Gamma on the ropes, Amy steps in and reveals that Gamma set her free, and Sonic allows this robot to live. I love how afterwards, if you go to talk to Gamma, he says,
Auto recovery system activated.
Yeah, basically telling us that we didn't do shit to him. Due to all the damage we did in Sky Deck, and I assume our battle with Gamma, the egg carrier begins to plummet to the earth, prompting Sonic to tell Amy and Tails to GTFO, while he goes to confront Robotnik. Sonic is then face to face with Chaos 6, closest to perfection as possible. Now getting another emerald from Froggy, a frog possessed by Chaos's tail which he snagged from this big purple cat named, big.
Oh, we'll get to him later, don't worry.
Then we surprisingly get a pretty fun boss with Sonic fighting Chaos 6. He has several crazy attacks, but with the use of the light speed attack, I'm able to make short work of him before he gets to show them off. Also due to Robotnik throwing these freezing badniks at us that we then use to freeze Chaos. If he didn't do that, we might not have any way to defeat him, but whatever, I'll take it. We seemingly defeat Chaos once and for all, and follow Robotnik off the ship to show him what for. Oh yeah, and Knuckles is here for some reason.
I thought you got lost or something.
Sonic then survives another fall to the ground from a tremendous height, this time landing in the middle of the Mystic Ruins jungle area. With the power of plot, the red ball of light directs him into these ruins and into the next level, Lost World. In here we don't find dinosaurs, but instead some pretty cool wooden hallways to run through, leading to a snaky snake and an area with a rising water level puzzle. This part of the level is a bit glitchy and lame, but overall it's designed interesting enough to not bother me too much. Plus the next area of the level with the intense music just looks incredible. You really feel like you're in a whole lost world. It also has a fun gimmick where you have to light up the area ahead with these mirrors, although it's a little dark for my liking. After we get all Indiana Jones with this rolling rock of doom, we end in an area I'm not too fond of because of its anti-gravity panel gimmick not controlling all too well. But I think this level has too many positives for me to outright dislike it. I have fun here, and that's what's important. At the end of the level, the red ball leads us to a mural which depicts a fearsome creature destroying the world. Is this chaos? Then we're transported to an ancient area back in time where we see utter devastation of a familiar place, the Emerald Altar. An echidna girl is crying at the devastation as the Chow lie motionless at her side. She says to us that she must stop this, and before we can see what she does, we're taken back to the jungle.
So what? Was that supposed to make us worried about Chaos? That he can destroy the world if he gets too strong? Didn't we already know that? You again?
Did you find and defeat Chaos?
No, because I'm still in the middle of the review.
No, we must before it's too late.
You know, if you wanted us to stop Chaos so quickly, you could have just spelled it out for us, not lead us on some bullshit.
No, we must find Chaos. Find Chaos.
Okay,
Chaos.
you can keep looking. I gotta get back to the review.
So, after that sudden unconsciousness, we spot Robotnik and follow him to his base. Hey look, it's Silver Sonic from Sonic 2. And Metal Sonic? Okay, then why doesn't he just use Metal Sonic again? He's strong. Whatever. We complete this mini puzzle and we're sent to Sonic's final stage, appropriately named Final Egg. Honestly, it's a pretty fun Robotnik level, reminding me a bit of Metropolis Zone, which unlike the majority of people, I actually really love. We get conveyor belts, large tunnels, and floating platforming challenges. The music in here is the same as Robotnik's base, but it's a cool calm theme that I'll never get sick of. Then in the second section of the level, we go all out. The amazing theme kicks into high gear with a bitchin' guitar riff that gets me super pumped for the area ahead. We get some high-speed sections and some challenging jumps to make. Not too challenging too, where I still have a fun time going through. It's the perfect stage to close on, really. It feels final. Feels like we've really built up to get to this point. Plus, Sonic's motivation is to truly put Robotnik out of commission, so you can just feel the weight of how dire going through here can get. Seems like you get to control and understand what was going on in 2D Sonic's head in the Genesis classics when dealing with Robotnik. Anyways, the last section goes back to the first theme, and we get to go through these massive air shafts, interwoven with some testing areas for Batniks and the like, and oh god, Tailstone, get the fuck out! I also get a kick out of charging up my lightspeed attack and letting it rip on this endless stream of Batniks at this part of the level. Once we're done here, we reach Robotnik, in his toughest creation to date, honestly. The Egg Viper is the final boss for Sonic's story, and it is no joke. One laser shot that you let hit you can knock you right off the platform, so you have to play it safe. It's really one of my favorite bosses ever, as I have respect for it, that I know it can always take me out if I'm not careful. It might be one of the hardest bosses in Sonic history, especially on your first time playing. It has several different phases where Robotnik tells you to
Get a load of this.
Yeah, they really just love taking lines from Robotnik's dialogue and overplaying it over and over again in these battles. But everyone loves and remembers it, so I'll let it go. Later on, he starts destroying the terrain and the platform gets smaller and smaller. After the last hit, he's got one last trick up his sleeve and you have to quickly avoid his kamikaze attack or else you have to do it all over again. I'm not ashamed to admit it's gotten me numerous times, but again, I have respect for this boss being a fun and interesting challenge. With Robotnik defeated, Sonic's story is complete, and he is met with an ecstatic Tails as they run off into the sunset. I'm glad even though Robotnik wasn't always the focus, defeating him is what closed out Sonic's part of the game, because he's his arch enemy for a reason. I will say you only get 2 Robotnik battles, and that's a tad bit lame, but the Egg Viper and its grandiose presentation more than make up for it.
This may come as no surprise, but I think Sonic's story is the best part of the game.
They nearly perfectly put the 2D Sonic in a 3D environment, and it truly felt like it worked just as well as 2D Sonic works. Like I said, it's not perfect, but when it gets right, it really gets right. I know many others love going back through Sonic stages yearly. Some are just too fun to pass up going back to. I think this is a real solid way to bring Sonic into 3D, and they have a wonderful base to build on and improve going forward. We can roll the credits with Sonic's theme in this game, It Doesn't Matter, which is probably one of my favorite Sonic-specific themes in the entire franchise.
With Sonic's story finally over, let's shift our attention to the little two-tailed fox boy, Miles Per Hour, aka Tails.
Tails' story begins in the same spot we first saw him in Sonic's story, on a test flight in his new plane, which malfunctions and crashes into the beach. Tails awakes later to find Sonic with his hand stretched out towards him. Ew, is that supposed to be a smile? Sonic, what's good with you? Anyways, they have a similar conversation to what was had in Sonic's story, but with some minor changes. You see, in Tails' story, he talks much more confidently, sometimes dominating the conversations. It's something that this game does with each story, focusing on the main character you're playing as and how situations play out in their point of view. This continues when Tails and Sonic confront Robotnik in the Mystic Ruins. Tails now talking to Robotnik directly rather than simply standing by as Sonic's sidekick. One of my favorite parts of Tails' story is the performance of the late Dean Bristow as Robotnik. You see, from Tails' perspective, Robotnik comes off as much more menacing. Robotnik himself has some silly lines in the game overall, but I really enjoy it as Bristow's first performance as the character, and it would only get better from here. To me, he's the Eggman I grew up with, and I'll always have a soft spot for him. Anyways, back to Tails, who after defeating Robotnik loses the Emerald and now must go on a wild goose chase with Sonic for the rest of them, taking us to Tails' first level, Windy Valley. In this level, we get a clear indication of what Tails' gameplay will be, and point blank, I think it's his best incarnation in the entire series. Tails is pretty much as fast as Sonic. He can't homing attack or spin dash, but he has his trademark power of flight, and his tail swipe that sadly doesn't get used in games very often. You can also roll into a ball when he runs by pressing B. Tails in this game is one of the most fun characters to control in the series. You can abuse his flight to take huge shortcuts and float over entire levels in some instances. See, look at him go all the way through Windy Valley. Now, these levels aren't entirely the same as Sonic's because they usually take a small portion of his levels and you have to race through them against an opponent. This allows me to bring up my main and really only problem with Tails' story, that being the length. You can easily beat his whole story in an hour, and you barely even scratch the surface of what he can do in this game. There's no reason why Tails gets the shaft on so many levels. Even if he doesn't play them in the story, I don't see why he can't go through some of Sonic's levels after beating the game. He would fit perfectly in them, but we're left with extremely short levels for who could be argued as the best controlling character in this game. Even still, I do enjoy these levels quite a bit, if a little short. The story progresses the same as Sonic's did up until they get shot down by the egg carrier, because if you remember, they got split up at that point. We don't see Tails crash into the ground, but instead we see a flashback to Sonic and Tails meeting set to sad music. I really love this scene. Even with the lacking graphical ability, they did a great job attempting to tell this story the best they could. This is the first time we really get to dive into Tails' character, his main arc trying to show that he's just as capable as Sonic and can stand up for himself. He even says he owes a lot to Sonic, but can't rely on him forever. So Tails goes into the jungle to find the last Chaos Emerald and runs into Froggy, who eats it. He chases Froggy into the sandy cave, which leads to the sub-game Sand Hill, another snowboarding section that you can actually play as Sonic in after you beat it as Tails.
So again, why can't I play Sonic's levels as Tails? Make it make sense, Sonic team!
Once we make it down the hill and collect Froggy, we get another flashback from the Red Ball, as it takes Tails to an entire civilization. Here we get to see a large race of echidnas, part of a tribe of warriors, seeming to be the ancestors of Knuckles. You can actually talk to them and they all seem very agitated. Full steam ahead! Miracles come from within! Move it! Everyone stand back! Oh geez, I'm sorry. So another thing that deserves a little critique is that here you actually need to search for a power-up to progress. Since this is most likely the first time you've been to this area, you'll have no idea where this thing is. You only get the idea to look for one if you talk to this random echidna secluded from the rest. The power-up in question is the Rhythm Badge, which is honestly pretty cool as it gives you the ability to spam your tail attack, using it to spin around extremely fast. You can use it to trim weeds and find hidden goodies, which is pretty neat. After you find it, you can talk to the echidna girl from Sonic's story, now introducing herself to you as Tikal. Here she tells you about a saying that her grandmother taught her that she is to never forget. But before we learn more about it and her, we wake up back in the Mystic Ruins to— oh god!
Yeah. Weird?
So after that debacle, Tails uses his newly acquired Chaos Emerald to supercharge his new plane, the Tornado 2, which is a slick dark blue. He goes and meets Sonic at the top of Red Mountain, where Sonic doesn't open the capsule to save the animals?
Wow, in Tails' point of view, Sonic is kind of a dick, huh?
So after we go through Sky Chase again, which yeah, it's the same exact sub-game as you played in Sonic's story, we crash on the egg carrier again and head to a much better sky deck. It's better because it's only the first section and you can easily skip through most of it. Sure, I know that I said that as a complaint with Tails' story earlier, but I don't like sky decks, so the less of it the better. The events transpire similarly as they did before that, this time with Amy having to convince Tails not to fight Gamma instead of Sonic. Why is it so quiet here? What's going on?
Hey, this ship is losing altitude!
Okay, there we go. So Tails takes Amy and splits as the egg carrier falls. When Tails lands, he says bye to Amy and has some of the worst line delivery in the game.
I wonder what happened to Sonic.
Tails then notices Robotnik crashing nearby. Robotnik does something and launches a missile directly into the heart of Station Square. After it doesn't explode, Tails mans up and chases after Robotnik in his last and best level, Speed Highway. You actually get to play almost the entire level here and you race Robotnik instead of Sonic, which is a fun change. It's actually a tad bit challenging too, which further adds to it being his best level. If every Tails level was like this and we had more of them, we might have the best character in the game right here. So Tails makes it to the missile, not allowing Robotnik to set it off. An enraged Robotnik then confronts Tails with a large and intimidating mech. And here he says probably the best line Dean Bristow has ever said as Robotnik.
You fool. Away, before I make mincemeat out of you.
This line just exemplifies the intensity that Bristow brought to the role of Robotnik in this performance, especially in Tails' story. Tails courageously stands up for himself against the Egg Walker, a relatively challenging boss that allows you to make great use of your tail spinning attack. By the way, I forgot to mention earlier Tails' other permanent power-up, the Jet Anklet, which gives you more airtime when you fly. It's easy to miss, so make sure you check back behind Twinkle Park at the beginning of the game. But yeah, after Tails' equivalent to the Egg Viper is defeated, Tails celebrates and receives jubilation by the Station Square crowd around him. I also love how some of these boss fights take place in locations we've come to know in the hub worlds, this one being outside the casino. With Tails' confidence boosted, he rushes to meet Sonic the next day to tell him all about it, and this is where both characters' stories end. Overall, Tails' story gets a thumbs up for me. However, I really wish we got more, especially when you consider how Tails' gameplay would be handled in the future. It never ever gets as good as this again, and we're left with so much untapped potential. This can also extend to his character arc too, as numerous times after, Sonic Team would neglect his growth as a character, only recently trying to repair him. And his main theme, I Wanna Fly High, is pretty fitting for him, though I'm not the fondest of it.
Now with the main duo taken care of, let's shift into an entirely different style of gameplay. Knock knock, it's Knuckles.
Here he comes, rougher than the rest of them, and yes, I'll say outright his rap song theme is an immense guilty pleasure of mine, and that will extend into the next game, but let's not get ahead of ourselves here. Knuckles' story chronologically starts first, as we see him guarding the Master Emerald on Angel Island. Knuckles in this game is characterized as a noble loner, destined to guard the Emerald forever. The game never goes too far into the purpose for that, it's mostly up for interpretation, but I do love this for Knuckles. In later games, he's characterized as just a hothead who isn't too bright, and sure, he's not the most intelligent character in the series, but Knuckles being this quiet, peaceful protector adds a bit of dimension to him, showing that he will only get angry to fight when what he cares for is threatened, that being the Emerald and his island. This is shown when out of nowhere the Emerald is destroyed. We can assume this was Robotnik's doing because earlier we see the egg carrier flying under the cover of darkness. Out of the Emerald appears Chaos Zero and the red ball of light. Knuckles lashes out, blaming Chaos for the Emerald's destruction, but Chaos gets the upper hand.
Knuckles, dude, you lost to Chaos Zero? Lame.
With the Master Emerald not whole, Angel Island falls from the sky, illustrated by this pretty neat cutscene. This explains why Ice Cap and Red Mountain are connected to the Mystic Ruins. Yeah, if you talk to the explorers of the ruins, they confirm that this entire mountainside appeared overnight, so Knuckles takes to the streets of Station Square to search for the pieces of the Master Emerald. As Knuckles, you run pretty fast on your feet. I'm not entirely sure if you're as fast as Sonic or Tails, but it's gotta be pretty darn close. He jumps the same way as the first two, but just like in his 2D appearances, he can glide by holding the A button afterward, and he'll climb a wall if he glides into one. At any point, Knuckles can hit B and stop the glide, falling straight down. He can also punch with the B button and combo into a punching dash by hitting it 3 times. I really enjoy his control and combat options. It all just flows really nicely and makes him fun to play as. I would even like it if we could play Sonic stages as Knuckles, but I can see that making less sense with their differing gameplay styles. Knuckles heads to the town hall where Chaos first showed up. He punches the security gate out and heads inside Speed Highway, his first level. Only we don't go up, down, and all around on the actual highways of the level. Knuckles' Speed Highway, we are confined to the town area at the end of Sonic's version of the level. This is great because it not only gives this area a true purpose, but it means we get to listen to At Dawn for a longer period of time. Sick! So instead of making it from beginning to end, we have this whole area to work with where we must find 3 pieces of the Master Emerald to beat the level. It's made easier by the Emerald radar that appears on the screen, acting as a hot and cold meter for each emerald as you get closer or further away. Like most people, I prefer this radar to the next game, but to jump ahead here, I actually prefer that game's treasure hunting levels. Most of Knuckles' levels in this game are pretty small and confined, and I kinda wish they were a bit larger. These levels can go by pretty quick, and with only 5 of them, Knuckles' story, like Tails, doesn't last very long unfortunately. But it starts here in Speed Highway, which isn't all that challenging, but if you need some help, the red ball of light is here to directly lead you in the direction of where an emerald piece is, which I don't find all that entirely helpful because it can just easily clip through a wall and make it hard to see where it goes.
Yeah, that ball of light does a bit more harm than good. Fuck, man.
Look,
What the fuck are you doing?
it's Chaos. I've found Chaos.
You ain't found shit, you're just running up the water bill.
I think I know where Chaos is now.
Oh yeah, where's that?
This way.
So yeah, Speed Hideaway as Knuckles is fun. I kind of just wish this area was Knuckles exclusive, because it was clearly built for him and not Sonic. In fact, I wish Knuckles' levels as a whole were made for him specifically and not choice areas from Sonic levels, but whatever. That's how this game does it, so that's how it be. Knuckles then heads to the casino, which he opens by climbing up and hitting the big button. Oh, but first, Chosen Space! So in Knuckles Casinopolis, we get the entire lobby area to work with, now with a bunch more added to the top near the ceiling. We get a whole pirate ship, a bronze lion statue that roars, and a pretty dope Sonic statue that— wait, Knuckles! Aw, why'd you do that for?
No one ever cuts us any slack.
I enjoy this stage a bit more than Speed Highway, though it is a bit smaller. I guess it just has to do with all the added flair that's around. Feels like somewhat of a different level than Sonic Casinopolis, and features areas we can't even get to in his. It also definitely takes place after Sonic has been there, hence the statue and the area where the Chaos Emerald being filled with coins. I don't know why, but that attention to detail puts it over the top for me. It's pretty fun. After we collect the emeralds, we're sent into our first of several flashbacks in Knuckles' story by our benevolent ball of light. Here, Knuckles himself gets to explore his ancestors' old civilization, which to him looks familiar. We don't have any power-ups to get here, so Knuckles can simply meet up with Tikal and her father in the front of this area. They don't notice Knuckles listening in as Tikal tries to beg her father to not invade the Emerald Altar and steal the Chaos Emeralds. He seems to want to use them to win war against their enemies, whom we never see, and Tikal just pleads for peace as Knuckles is sent back to Station Square. Here he notices Sonic and Tails on the ground.
I wonder what those guys are doing.
Yeah, this is a fun thing they do with the hub worlds.
What I mean is that you can sometimes run into characters in the adventure fields as you run through. Some of them you kind of have to go out of your way for, but sometimes you can actually talk to them before you meet them in the story. And like Big here, you can unlock them prematurely.
Froggy, where are you?
Knuckles goes into the hotel where he spots Robotnik with a shiny object in his hand, heading into the elevator very, very slowly, somehow not noticing Knuckles behind him, especially when Knuckles is speaking about him loudly, right behind him. So Knuckles follows Robotnik into a dining area of the hotel, which seems like a mighty fine boss arena. And it is, as Robotnik reveals that he has a Chaos Emerald, which he uses to increase the now appearing Chaos's power. We saw this guy in Sonic's story, but now we actually get to fight him, Knuckles wanting to get him good this time. Now, before I learned you can just attack him pretty much whenever you want, this boss fight actually used to give me some trouble. I think Chaos 2 is a pretty fun and threatening version of the character, as he walks towards you in an intimidating manner. He can turn into a large ball and bounce around, but if you glide into him, it'll leave him vulnerable to a boop in the head. He also waves his arms in a chaotic manner, and after he's done, will also leave him open to a hit. That's the way you're supposed to do it, because if you try to attack him as he's coming towards you, he'll stop you. However, like I said, a well-timed boop to the head when he's transforming will do the trick. He also has a large shockwave move that's pretty tough to avoid. It's a fun boss, but I've learned how to break it, so the challenge is somewhat lost on me. After beating Chaos, Robotnik warns that we still haven't seen his true power and tells Knuckles that Sonic is after the Master Emerald pieces too, obviously trying to deceive him. Knuckles ponders what Robotnik says, and he does a moonwalk. Ooh, look at him go!
You've been hit by a smooth criminal.
So instead of going to see if Sonic is still outside, Knuckles heads straight back to the Mystic Ruins where he gets his first power-up. He goes to this cave off in the distance near Tails' workshop and discovers the Shovel Claw!
The Shovel Claws!
Look, I loved how much of a big deal they made the Shovel Claw when Knuckles used it. Hey wait, Sonic X also covered the story of Sonic Adventure. So after Knuckles gets the shovel claw, he can now dig underground by pressing A and B together. I kind of find it clunky to use this way, but it is pretty useful. Much like Tails' rhythm badge, you can use it to find hidden goodies underground. You also won't be able to finish Knuckles' story without it, because in the next level, Red Mountain, at least one emerald piece is always underground. Speaking of, Red Mountain is by far my favorite level in Knuckles' story. Here we get a large open area for us to glide around. So many mountainsides to explore here, and they found a way to make it work for both Knuckles and Sonic to go through without it feeling like it was made for one character. I still would rather they have their own exclusive level design, but here it doesn't bother me. Because of how large it is, this level takes a bit of time. Not too long where it's draining. It's almost like the perfect amount of time. You can't just easily find the emeralds here. You actually can feel like a treasure hunter climbing up large mountains, digging, and even breaking open enemies. Some of these are well hidden too, so sometimes you gotta think outside the box and hit up every little hidden area to find them all. If all of Knuckles' stages were this open and with this much size, I think I'd enjoy his gameplay a lot more. Not to say that I don't, because I truly do. I just wish there was more to it, and this stage truly delivers on all fronts. Once all emeralds are gotten here, we get to see that confrontation between Knuckles, Sonic, and Tails. It's not much different here. I mean, sure, the characters have different lines, but it's not as significantly different from Sonic's story. Although I think Knuckles has some more funny quips here.
I'll make him eat dirt.
We fight Chaos 4 for the third time, and this time with Knuckles it takes even longer. By now, you're probably really sick of this boss, and it's so slow and monotonous that it becomes a drag to do over and over. It's not like Chaos changes up his attacks either, it's pretty much the same exact boss for the trio. This makes this boss my least favorite in the game. Maybe if each character's version had unique fighting strategies it would be more fun, but once you get to this point with each of the three, I just groan and try to get through it as quickly as humanly possible. Thankfully, we don't have to do the exact same sky chase afterwards, and Knuckles heads into the jungle with some unfinished business. Before doing anything with the stone key before you, off in the distance there's a ledge which holds Knuckles' second and final power-up, his fighting gloves. In the same vein as the light speed attack, you can use this attack to do more damage on bosses and surrounding enemies. Though personally I never use it much. You charge it with B and let go when it's ready, so it certainly exists. There's really only one use for it, and it'll come later. So when you go back to collect the stone statue at the beginning of the jungle, you must bring it to the Lost World Temple, which at this point you may have realized the same temple seen at the center of the ancient Echidna tribe in the flashback, now almost completely buried underground. It also confirms that at one point Angel Island and the Mystic Ruins were connected. Since we haven't talked much about it, this is probably where you'll start to get annoyed with the jungle because it's so easy to get lost. Sure, there's a map and some landmarks, but the entire jungle looks identical on the inside, so you might wander for a while before you get to your destination. There are even explorers who claim to be lost in there for a while. A hidden stone nearby the temple you can dig up is the second key. You bring it back and that unlocks the Lost World. I'm not the biggest fan of this section of the Lost World, but the music is a pretty calming jazzy piece. There are spots where emeralds are that you can't really get to without some maneuvering. This requires some out-of-the-box thinking, which can be fun, but given the hazards and enemies in this level, it can also be annoying. This level is fine, but it's probably my second least favorite of Knuckles' stages. After we collect them, we are thrown into another flashback, this time at the Emerald Altar. Tikal is back, face to face with the Master Emerald. She's talking with some sort of presence, which you can hear responding to her with the water droplets. She warns that the altar must be kept away from people because her father is going to attack and attempt to steal the emeralds away. Without a resolution to the problem yet, Knuckles is then taken back to his Emerald Altar, where he assembles the pieces of the Master Emerald. Once assembled, he realizes that there's still some pieces left, and the Master Emerald somehow projects the egg carrier into itself to give Knuckles a hint. Just when he figures out that he needs to board the egg carrier, we have a convenient appearance of E-102 Gamma. However, as we'll come to find out in Gamma's story, this makes absolutely no sense, because at this point in his story, he would have no reason to be in this area. Nevertheless, Knuckles follows him to Robotnik's base where the egg carrier takes off when he boards it. Now the worst part of this story occurs when we go to the Sky Deck, Knuckles' last stage. If you hated the weird gravity changing in Sonic's story, this one can be much worse. You see, Knuckles' section of Sky Deck solely revolves around this gimmick. Knuckles is actually the one messing with the gravity in this area, moving this lever around to open the doors that contain emerald pieces. This actually explains why Sonic's Sky Deck goes through all of these weird changes, which is probably the only positive thing I can say about this level. The lever itself is so hard to move correctly, half the time you'll be pushing it and Knuckles will let out this weird grunt, not moving it anywhere. In addition, you basically have to find where each emerald is located, then go back to the lever and painstakingly turn it in each direction necessary to open a door or move an object to reveal the emerald. This just draws out more time, and since the gravity of the level level is all messed up, it makes it difficult to get around. This to me is the worst treasure hunting level, possibly in any Sonic game. It's such a drag, and it leaves a bad taste in my mouth for the end of Knuckles' story. Before we finish things off, we get another flashback, which is pretty much the same one we saw in Sonic's story near the end, this time with Knuckles. We hear the roar of a monster and the Emerald Altar in a blaze before Tikal runs off and we wake up in the egg carrier. Knuckles then meets up with Sonic right before Sonic runs off to chase down Robotnik. When they leave, Chaos 6 rises back up once again, leaving Knuckles with one final showdown with him. I really like that Knuckles is the last one to fight him, and we can use the maximum heat Knuckles attack to end his existence pretty quick. I like the attention to detail with this area of the egg carrier being partially destroyed after Sonic's battle with the beast. It's a pretty fun boss fight, and even though it's roughly the same as Sonic's, I don't mind it nearly as much as Chaos 4. After Knuckles defeats Chaos, he takes the emeralds he's left behind back to Angel Island and finally repairs the Master Emerald. Then his story ends just how it began, Knuckles monologuing that even though he doesn't know the full story, he believes it is better that way, and he's at peace once more, fulfilling his duty to guard the Master Emerald. Knuckles' part of the game from solely a story perspective is probably one of the most interesting because there's a lot we can infer about the history of his people. I just wish they went into more detail about it and how he was the one who ended up being the lone echidna left around to guard the Master Emerald. I really wish mainline Sonic games would dive deeper into this backstory more, and treat Knuckles as this noble character, destined or cursed to spend his entire life in solitude. Knuckles would then move on to be a comic relief character, who tags along with Sonic and Tails a lot of times, completely abandoning his post. Even still, I'd say Knuckles' story was one of the highlights of the game, and like with Tails, there was a lot of potential for more.
Well, we're halfway done with the characters, so let's turn our attention to Amy Rose and her first ever playable appearance in a mainline Sonic game.
Amy is unfortunately where a lot of people start to point out some of the bigger flaws with this game. I find her to be a bit fun to control, but it feels like a struggle. She moves very slow and can't roll into a ball, so jumping into enemies is non-existent. She does have her trademark Pico Pico hammer that she can use though, but she must go to a complete stop and it's not really the most accurate weapon in the world. Because she's so slow, I find myself jumping to try and gain enough speed so that Amy will do a triple jump if you press B while running. It's the only way you're gonna get around at a somewhat quick pace. I find this fun, but Amy having very little speed is an odd choice, because nothing up until this point in the series would lead you to believe that she's a slow and weak character. The developers actively chose to make her this way, and sure, you want to differentiate her from the other characters, but a slow-moving Sonic character just feels more like a generic platformer character, which is the antithesis of Sonic games as a whole. Like I said, I do enjoy Amy's gameplay, but that might just be because of how much I've played this game. It has a lot of flaws that I just addressed, but I don't outright dislike it. So Amy's story begins nearly halfway through the other stories in the game. She's walking in Station Square, having just gone shopping, reminiscing about how much fun her life used to be when Sonic was around. Just as that happens, the egg carrier flies overhead and out of it falls a blue flicky bird. It crashes into Amy and she quickly tries to comfort the injured bird. After the bird comes a robot named Zero who immediately gives chase to Amy. They lose Zero for now and meet up with Sonic, who Amy asks to protect the bird. Instead of letting Amy tag along like in his story, Sonic actually runs away from Amy here. This is one of those times when the change in perspective with each story is very fascinating because we don't know who is telling the truth. Did Sonic in his head think he allowed them to just join him to be a good guy? Or did he really run away from Amy like that and just ignored that in his telling of the events? Either way, it's fun to think about. Amy meets up with Sonic at Twinkle Park, where Zero appears again. Amy coerces Sonic into going into Twinkle Park, except here she clearly runs away from Sonic once they enter. This begins Amy's Twinkle Park, her first level. The goal of Amy's levels is to make it to the end and grab the balloon while avoiding Zero the entire time. You cannot defeat Zero, you can only knock him back with your hammer to momentarily stun him, but he will always come back. He can shoot his hands out at you like a rocket, and he also has a shockwave attack. He's not much of a threat, but it's some added pressure that differentiates her gameplay from everyone else. If they wanted to truly make it different, they could have made her gameplay based more on stealth and not just slow platforming, but they obviously didn't go in that direction. Amy starts out by this pool in Twinkle Park and has to flip all the switches to open these doors. They lead you into this really creepy dungeon funhouse area. It's cool that Amy gets her own unique level design here, but why does it have to be so unnerving? I mean, just listen to this music.
Yeah, needless to say, 6-year-old me was not the biggest fan of playing as Amy at first because of this level.
In any case, Amy continues down this creepy walkway to this mirror room section, which always made it more difficult to control her movements. It just feels super clunky here, like I'm always gonna bump into the walls. Next up, we have this area which also makes use of a mirror to tell you what floorboards are actually traps, if it wasn't already pretty obvious with the different way the trap floors look. After that, we make our way back outside briefly to an area of Twinkle Park that Sonic went through. Here we are introduced to another gameplay element in Amy's story, these little cans. You can take these cans and go inside of them to hide from Zero. However, even though he won't see you, he'll most likely start doing his shockwave attack and hit you anyway, so this can be pretty useless. If they wanted to take my earlier advice and focus more on the stealth, this is not it. Afterwards, we grab the Balloon of Freedom and escape the level. I love at the end of these levels, you can see Zero jumping up to try and reach you to no avail. Next up, after we go have some fun in Twinkle Circuit, Sonic is nowhere to be found, and Zero finally catches Amy. Zero meets up with the egg carrier in the Mystic Ruins, and Amy is abducted and put in a prison cell with her bird friend. In walks E102 Gamma, who demands that Amy give him the bird.
We'd love to, really, but the Fox censors won't allow it.
Amy refuses to let go of her friend, and then questions Gamma on why he needs it. Gamma cannot provide an explanation, and Amy begs him to release her. Her compassion for the bird confuses Gamma, and Amy pities him, as he can't experience true emotion. Then, out of nowhere, the bird flies up to Gamma and stares into his soul. This reprograms Gamma somehow, and he gains a conscience. He opens the cell for Amy to escape and gives her directions on how to get out of the egg carrier. Amy now addresses Gamma as her friend and thanks him for the help. Next, Amy has to face a great challenge in the form of an awesome game. Yes, Amy gets her own sub-game in the form of Hedgehog Hammer. It's a neat whack-a-mole style game where you gotta hit the Sonic and Supersonic moles and avoid the Robotnik ones. If you can beat the score, you'll be able to exit the room, and you'll also be granted Amy's first power-up, the Warrior's Feather. Yet, this is probably the most useless one in the entire game. It allows you to stand in place and spin your hammer around you. There's really no reason to use this because you can't move while using it. It also leaves Amy dizzy after using it for so long, and if you even want to use it in a Hedgehog Hammer, you'll likely end up just hitting one of the Robotnik moles and lose. You can at least use Knuckles' attack for something, but this just serves no purpose. To continue, Amy heads to the first new level we've seen in a while, the only level that is never playable with the main trio, the Hot Shelter. This is probably my second least favorite level next to the Sky Deck, but I don't think that's necessarily bad. It's simply a level made for slower, more standard platformer characters. It also tends to run a bit on the long side as well, and it can drag on towards the end, especially as Amy. This is probably her worst level because of its length. It honestly feels like just a lot of needless gimmicks thrown in your way to stretch out the length of the level. I do like when you put all these boxes in the right outlets and Zero crashes through the TV, but aside from that, it doesn't help hide Amy's clunky controls. It also features slopes, which Amy has a terrible time climbing up, except for this one random section where she gains a lot of speed. If she was this fast for the entire game, maybe she'd be more fun to play as. After we do a less fun version of the box puzzle, we make it to the exit of Hot Shelter. I wish we had more egg carrier levels, but going from outside in the Sky Deck to the bowels of the ship here is a cool concept, I guess. Next, Amy gets her one and only flashback scene, even though she's as far removed from the Chaos plot as anyone in this game. In fact, her flashback is the only time we see her and Chaos in the same scene in the entire story. Also, the problem with this flashback is that it starts you in the wrong area, so you might just wander around the Echidna civilization for a while until you go through the tunnel to the other side, which you might not even know that you could do. I don't understand why they chose to do this because the other characters always start in the right area for their flashbacks. To talk about the flashback itself, this is where Tikal first meets the Chow at the Emerald Altar, and before it ends we can see Chaos Zero starting to rise out of the water to her surprise. Amy returns to the egg carrier in the swimming pool area? Okay. And before she can escape, Robotnik catches up to her and her bird. Just in the nick of time, Sonic and Tails arrive, but Robotnik still takes the bird and steals its Chaos Emerald it was in possession of. Next up, you might remember that a character battle happens here, but since Amy doesn't participate, we only see the cutscene of her intervening, without letting us know who won in her story. She steps in between Gamma and Sonic and explains that Gamma helped her, and Sonic chooses not to fight. Afterwards, Sonic goes off to fight Robotnik, and Tails takes Amy to safety off the damaged ship. However, before that, Amy convinces Gamma to go rogue on Robotnik, and he chooses to free himself from his control. Once we're back in Station Square, Tails and Amy part ways. Amy goes to talk with her bird friend, who shows her a picture of their family. Amy vows to reunite them, getting the idea from Gamma to check out Robotnik's base. Also, I'd like to point out this whole scene canonically takes place at the same time Robotnik is launching a missile into the city, with Amy being completely oblivious to it.
Can you imagine what it would have sounded like if they included the missile firing in Amy's story?
So I'll help you find your family. I've come this far. I may as well go all the way. That robot said Dr. Eggman's base is in the Mystic Room. So what do you say we check it out?
Damn, I was 2 days from retirement.
So this brings us back to the Mystic Ruins, although strangely enough the mountain connecting it to Angel Island is still there. Even though it clearly should be up in the air at this point, but whatever, I guess they couldn't just remove it. Before you progress, you should head through this area to find this raft that will take you to the egg carrier crash site. Here you can retry Hedgehog Hammer, and if you get a score of at least 3,000, you get Amy's Long Hammer. It's a bit bigger, but doesn't make much of a difference, although it does make a different sound. So Amy then goes into the jungle, and you want to do yourself a favor and try to stay on top of the trees as long as possible, because going through the jungle as Amy is very annoying. Thankfully you only have to straight shoot to the back of it to find Robotnik's base, but it's never really fun running through this area. It's really the only part of these hub worlds that I dislike. We enter Robotnik's base here, and Amy is once again face to face with Metal Sonic. I wish she commented on this because we clearly got a clip of him in the beginning of her story, but I guess that's asking for too much. Amy does the same puzzle Sonic did to enter her last zone, which is Final Egg, just like his. Yeah, Amy gets 3 levels while every other character gets at least 4. That's a bit sexist, eh, Sonic Team? In any case, Final Egg is a bit shorter than Hot Shelter and has that great music to boot. But honestly, this level is just a bit forgettable. I mean, sure, we get some exclusive parts for Amy, but not enough to make it that fun of an experience. It's essentially just a part of Sonic's level done slower. The one part of this level that's notable for Amy is this section where you have to guess the right door. I swear this one is so annoying because you always have to check every single one to find the correct it was the first one. So after we grab the final balloon, we leave the base with no birds in sight. She then gets the idea to head to the egg carrier crash site. Now you may be wondering why I told you to go back there earlier if you were already going to be coming back to it later. This is because once you arrive there, Amy's story ends, since we find the bird's family right away. However, before they can depart freely, Zero knocks the bird out of the sky, and it's finally time to end this machine once and for all. Here is Amy's only boss fight, and it's Zero. Since you can't hurt Zero, you have to knock him into this conveniently placed electric fence around this now repaired area of the egg carrier. If the fence wasn't there, you'd have no chance against him, and there's no logical explanation for its existence other than it's a video game, so I'll shut up. Zero does the same attacks he's been doing all game, so you should already be able to avoid them. You bonk him into the vents, which short circuits him, opening up his head. Bonk him again, and repeat that 2 more times, and you win. I actually enjoy this boss for what it's worth, and it's pretty cathartic to destroy this cheesy hardware that's been annoying us this entire story. With Zero defeated, Amy tends to her bird friend, who almost fails at taking flight, only to surround Amy with its family to thank her and fly off into the air. Amy, with her work done, achieves more self-confidence within herself, saying that she's gonna make Sonic respect her. And sadly, like Tails' character, future games would shit all over this character arc, and she goes back to being Sonic's obsessive fangirl. Still, in a vacuum, it's a solid ending for her game, and even though it was a bumpy ride, it wasn't too much of a chore. It was fine enough to play through and have some fun with. It's certainly not even close to the best parts of this game, but it wasn't worst Sonic game ever material.
However, the same unfortunately can't be said for our next character, the big purple cat himself, Big.
Big the Cat's story is probably the most notorious part of this game. In fact, the character himself is probably equally as notorious. One could make the argument that he's completely out of place in this game and doesn't add much to it. Although he's been ingrained in Sonic media since this game's release, so it's hard to imagine a world without Big at this point. A lot of people like to drag on this part of the game to prove that the game itself is simply not good. Now I enjoy a lot of this game, but not all of it. Big's story is definitely the low point of the game, no doubt, but is it as bad as everyone says it is?
The answer is yes. And no.
Big's story starts right after Knuckles' story begins, as you can see Angel Island fall from the sky and feel its impact when it hits the ground. This wakes up Big as he was sleeping in his home in the jungle with his friend Froggy, who yes, is a frog. Froggy goes to investigate something nearby, which turns out to be the tail of Chaos. Yeah, somehow his tail broke out of the Master Emerald separately from his body, even though Chaos Zero isn't seen with the tail even in the flashbacks. But whatever, it's a video game, right? So Big wonders what's going on with his pal, and...
You're looking kinda weird, good buddy.
God, I'll never get over Big's voice. It's just the most stereotypical voice for an unintelligent character. It's like straight out of a Looney Tunes cartoon. Big in this game is famously played by John St. John, the voice of Duke Nukem. Rumors have floated around for years that John phoned in this performance thinking nothing of it, but little did he know it might be his most famous role. Even more so than the King, baby. Either way, however much effort John put into this role is irrelevant because at this point it's kind of iconic. It's a guilty pleasure for myself and thousands of Sonic fans everywhere. I really can't see Big portrayed in any other way. In fact, future voice actors of Big really just try to imitate John's original performance. So Big notices that Froggy has grown a tail, and before he can do anything about it, Froggy, now possessed by Chaos's tail, eats up Big's lucky charm, which is actually a Chaos Emerald. Froggy runs off, and that begins the entire goal of this story, to simply find Froggy.
Froggy.
I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh at some of these lines. John St. John, you are truly a legend.
Controlling Big in-game, however, is a total nightmare. It's not a stretch to say that he might be the worst controlling character in Sonic history. While Amy was just slow, she was still fairly easy to control. A little wobbly, but it wasn't all that frustrating. When you're controlling Big, it feels like you're constantly fighting the game to get him to move in the direction you want. He seems like he can never walk fully straight, and you'll always find yourself leaning from one side to the other. It's almost like he has two left feet, which cats usually do, but he only stands on two legs.
I'd imagine if Big tried to walk on all fours, he'd collapse horrifically, but I digress.
Big surprise, he can't jump into a ball in any way, but what he can do is climb ladders faster than anyone. It's truly absurd, but I guess he has to be like a cat in some ways, right? Also, when you hit the B button, he swings his fishing lure kinda like Amy's hammer. It's not at all useful as an attack, but it's the best thing you got, so be careful with it. The reason Big has a fishing lure is that the only way he can catch Froggy is literally going to select bodies of water in his levels and fishing for the amphibian. We follow Froggy into the sewer. Oh yeah, Big casually lifts a car, sure, whatever. And he goes into Twinkle Park through a secret entrance. Also, don't forget, there's a secret power-up in the waters near where you get Tails' jet anklet. There's a few of these lure power-ups hidden in each adventure field that'll help you catch bigger fish. Because yes, we're going fishing. I have a horrible history with Big's fishing. You see, you're supposed to approach the pool of water, hold B and select the area of the pool you want to cast to. Hopefully it's the one Froggy is in. You wait for Froggy to bite and then you hold B to reel him in, but not too hard because if you reach the top of this gauge here, your lure will break and you'll lose a life.
Yeah, this jerk-off doesn't have any more fishing lines. What kind of fisherman are you, Big?
Now, I would always have this problem where I would seemingly get bites from Froggy and they would quickly let go before I could start reeling. When I was a kid, the only way I would actually be able to see the end of the game is when someone beat Big's story for me. I never knew what the trick was for years. In fact, it was only during my Sonic Adventure Let's Play that I figured out you're supposed to wiggle the control stick in order to hook Froggy onto your lure. You could tell at this point I was pretty fed up, so I just looked it up.
What? 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 What the fuck? What? You feel me?
Also, I might just be as dumb as Big, because if you go pick a character, you can select instructions, which essentially tells you how to play as them. In Big's, it clearly says to use the control stick to hook things. So, yeah, I've owned this game for almost 20 years, and I never bothered to look at that. But to be honest, once you figure out how to fish with Big, it's actually kind of fun. I know, that's the last thing you'd expect me to say, but really, after all the action-packed gameplay we've had, it's somewhat relaxing to just cast your lure and fish. Granted, it's not the best fishing mechanics. In fact, I'm sure people who play fishing games would say it's straight up bad, but I don't play fishing games, so I actually don't mind. And this is a recent development for me, because I was pretty much on the Big hate train until I recorded the footage for this review. When I attempted to catch bigger fish to show off how it looks to do so, I actually had some fun with it. Catching a big fish after fighting with it for so long is quite an awesome feeling. I know in the grand scheme of things it's pretty unnecessary, because you only need to catch Froggy. But I don't know, this time around catching these crazy looking fish is just fun too. If you want to catch Froggy and you know how, it's really easy to quickly beat Big's story in like half an hour. But if you want to catch as many big fish as possible, you can take your time and have some fun with it. I know it's crazy to be praising Big's gameplay this much, but I'm gonna be straight up here. I don't mind it. The main argument people make against it is that it is a gameplay style that has nothing to do with what Sonic's all about, which I cannot argue with. That's obvious. You could remove Big, Froggy, and this whole story and lose nothing with the overall narrative. But like I said, we wouldn't have this fun character or the hilarity that comes with playing as this walking punchline. So Big catches Froggy, or he doesn't because he says,
Oh, now what am I gonna do?
Yeah, Froggy gets away, I guess. Don't worry, this will only happen again one more time.
It happens when we take the stone and head to the next level, which is Ice Cap. But before we go there, we collect this life belt, which allows Big to actually swim. Yeah, a Sonic character that can actually swim. You hold down the A button to drop down into the water and let go of it to float back up, and it's fine. It is kind of hard to get out of these pools of water with it, but it's not the worst thing in the world. Ice Cap as Big takes place in the area with the creepy music, of course, but what's cool is that they add hidden areas to this zone that you can only access with Big. You can even find another lure power-up. These hidden zones exist in Big's second and third levels where you can catch the biggest fish and add it to your score. You can catch a large eel, a hammerhead shark, or even these weird, ungodly half-fish, half-robot abominations. As I said earlier, I prefer when characters have level design catered towards them in this game, so this is actually a positive. Just try not to get lost on your way back to Froggy's pool, which you gotta break open with a rock, or you can just use Big. Sure. Now here's where things get messy, because after we lose Froggy here, the next time we see him is in that scene with Tails holding him. So you mean to tell me we lost Froggy in Ice Cap, and he had time to go into the jungle, go all the way down the sand hill, and finish the flashback with Tails in the time it took Big to make it over there? Man, he's slow.
Sorry, if I had only held on tighter.
And that line is so ridiculous that I completely forgot about the plot hole there, so let's move on.
At this point, if you haven't already, go back to Big's house and grab the power rod from under his bed for a longer casting distance. So Froggy somehow makes it back to Station Square where you'll see him make a break for the hotel. This means we're gonna take a trip to the coast. And I literally mean a trip, because listen to this music! Yeah, the developers knew the demographic this would appeal to very well. So here we find another hidden area with more crazy fish, or we can just catch the frog. I love the appearance of this level and the vibes it brings. Plus, it truly feels like an area solely made for Big. Even when I got lucky enough to make it to this level back in the day, I would have a good amount of fun just exploring. This time we actually do catch Froggy until Gamma swoops in and easily yanks the frog away from us, as Big follows behind, flailing his arms as he panics. He eventually follows Gamma all the way to the egg carrier as it takes off, explaining how he got up there for later, but not explaining how nobody noticed the 6-foot-tall purple abomination boarding. Also, Knuckles would have been boarding at this time too, right? Who was doing security here? On the ship, Big smells Froggy and figures out which door he's behind.
Yeah, he didn't think once to do this before, but he can do it now, so whatever.
But since we're heavy enough to open the doorway to the prison cells, we are able to find another lure power-up, so don't forget that. Next, it's Big's last level, the Hot Shelter, which actually has you platform briefly to get to this level's pool of water. It sucks, but I guess it's there. Anyways, we drain the water in these tanks to release Froggy and some other really big fish. So if you want to catch a shark, you gotta upgrade that lure. Anyways, here we catch Froggy for the final time.
By the way, this is where Big gets his one and only flashback, but I forgot to put it in the script, so you could probably tell how inconsequential it is.
And just when you think we're gonna escape, Robotnik stops us on the ship with Chaos 4 in the nick of time to collect what's his. This is actually how Chaos 4 grows into Chaos 6, because Robotnik gives it the emerald he got from the bird, and Froggy spits up the one he swallowed earlier at Chaos as well. Robotnik then explains this all in front of Big, who just flails his arms as he probably can't even comprehend what's taking place. Then Froggy merges with Chaos 6 to give it its tail back, right before Sonic arrives on the scene. Sonic promises to help Big get Froggy back, and what takes place is one of the funniest things in this game. That, of course, being Big's sole boss fight, if you want to even call it that. Chaos 6 will try to crawl into you, and all you have to do is cast your lure in the correct spot and the boss ends instantly. I've seen many a time where this boss only lasts seconds. It's so pathetic, but again, it's a guilty pleasure. Then while Chaos 6 is still fighting with Sonic, we exit from the main plot that we were there for like 2 seconds. But things get weirder. You see, how does Big escape the egg carrier now? Well, somehow this guy is able to hijack Tails' plane and safely make it back to his house, despite never flying before in the first place. I mean, Sonic claims he's a pilot, though we rarely see him fly, so sure, everyone in the Sonic world can just fly planes. Then in perhaps my biggest guilty pleasure of this entire game, we see Froggy back to himself and Big with him, sharing a bunch of fun times and laughs. This is also set to Big's main song, which I honestly love with all my heart. It sounds so corny and goofy, but it just fits perfectly, and you really can feel the bond these two share. It's nice because it's felt like we've creepily stalked this poor frog the whole time. But no, they're the best of pals, and that's where Big's story ends. Is it as bad as everyone says? Sure, if that's what you think. There's a bunch of solid arguments stating how unnecessary it is to this game and how far it brings it down. But for me, nah, it's fine. A younger version of myself would probably just ride the hate train like everyone else. But I cannot lie when I say that I actually enjoyed Big's story more than Amy's this time around. It's not something I'd want in a Sonic game, unless it's an optional side thing like they did in Sonic Frontiers, which might actually be my favorite part of that game. But in this game, yeah, it's just fine.
And now, rounding out the cast with the 6th character in the game, we finally get to control creation of Dr. Robotnik, the renegade robot himself, E102, codenamed Gamma.
Gamma's story begins as his literal life begins. He is awoken at Robotnik's base where his creation is complete. Robotnik introduces himself as his creator and names him Gamma. He also states that Gamma must only obey him and directs him to the shooting range, where his older brother E101 Beta is practicing. He's warned that he is not as advanced as Beta, but that he should still do fine. This allows us to get into the gameplay of Gamma's story, which is unlike any kind of Sonic gameplay before it. We enter Final Egg, ironically as Gamma's first level, where you'll discover his gameplay is based on shooting targets to rack up points. You hold down B for your laser and lock onto targets by directing your laser at them. You must let go of the button before a small amount of time, and you'll fire at each target you've locked onto. Gamma can also jump normally with A, pretty high I might add. Gamma moves quite fast, and will even mode change into a wheeled version of himself himself to go even faster at certain speeds. He's nowhere near Trio levels, but it's fast enough for his style of gameplay. In Gamma's levels, you are actually timed, and in order to increase your time, you have to combo targets together in succession. I don't really understand why they went this route with Gamma's levels, but it adds a little bit of challenge. The latter of his levels actually being quite difficult with the amount of time being a bit short at the start. It's different, which I prefer because at this point we've played these same stages enough, you'd likely want some more variety. Here in Final Egg, we get to see— oh god, there he is again! Oh, thank God. We can now shoot these creepy-ass dolls. No more nightmare fuel for me. The actual purpose of these dolls was legit target practice for these new E-Series robots like Gamma. At the end of this short target practice, we come to meet the Sonic doll. Once destroyed, it ends our level, starting this trend of destroying a target to end Gamma's levels, all except for level 2. After Final Egg, Robotnik gives us another challenge. Oh look, he's doing the moonwalk now too.
You've been hit by a smooth criminal.
We are put to the test against Beta in our first boss battle in this story. The winner gets to be a part of the Egg Carrier crew, and the loser, well, more on that later. Anyways, here's the biggest problem with Gamma's story. These battles. They're essentially at the same difficulty as character battles, sometimes easier because you barely need to move your character in order to win. Just stand still, lock on, and fire, and that's it. It sucks because I would like to have an all-out firefight with another mech, but sadly they're extremely easy to beat. Another instance of wasted potential in this game, as they could have done so much more. Why not add some hazards? Maybe include some furniture to block attacks from each side. Just anything to make this not so lame. We defeat Beta and earn the right to be on the Egg Carrier, but Beta silently protests against himself being left behind. Robotnik says he could be used for spare parts, and this line flew over my head as a kid, not knowing how dark this actually would be. The Egg Carrier takes off with Robotnik now joined by his elite crew of E100 robots, Gamma, Delta, Epsilon, and Zeta.
Guess Robotnik was a fan of the Greek life in his college days, huh?
Ever the showman, Robotnik puts together this little fanfare for himself to announce his first mission for his crew. On the screen behind him, he shows a tailed frog, that being Froggy, who we know from Big Story. Robotnik has somehow learned that Froggy has swallowed a Chaos Emerald and must be found in order for his plans to come to fruition. He sends the robots off, which brings Gamma to Station Square. This is probably when talking to the residents of Station Square is at its funniest, because they all either think Gamma is wearing a costume or simply cower in fear of him. Also, by talking to them, you'd find out that the frog was seen at Emerald Coast, so that's our next stop. In what amounts to a very short level, only being the beginning area of Sonic's version of the level, we search for Froggy. We don't do this by fishing, but just getting to the end and collecting Froggy is enough to succeed here. This level is a bit forgettable. It's really just the beginning of Sonic Stage, and even though shooting up everything can be fun, it can feel like you're on autopilot in this stage. Some of Gamma's early levels can be like that, when there isn't much thought to the platforming elements. This stage also creates a huge inconsistency in the story. So at the end, when we capture Froggy, Big is nowhere to be found whatsoever, and instead of running off with him, we're then sent to a flashback. To jump ahead to after the flashback, we awake from it already on the Egg Carrier. This is worth noting because this is apparently when Knuckles follows Gamma back to the Egg Carrier nearby Red Mountain, which makes no sense. Did Gamma somehow sleepwalk all the way to Red Mountain and then to the base to be picked up at the Egg Carrier? Not to mention all the while having Knuckles and Big following him and nobody noticing.
I don't know how many people this bothers, but it just annoys the hell out of me. For the most part, they tie in all the characters' stories pretty well, but here it looks like they just threw up their arms. Plus, it gets worse later in the story, but don't worry, we'll get there.
So yeah, somehow the robot Gamma is able to be sent to the past in a flashback. I don't know how this is possible, but I've already questioned enough here. Here is honestly the worst flashback because we have to hear these Chow singing their annoying song for a good minute. The best part of this flashback is honestly at the start of it where Gamma is confused.
This presents a problem.
I do love Gamma's deadpan delivery. They made him sound like a machine that has some humanity in him trying to escape out of its robotic conditions. He doesn't sound like a stereotypical robot, nor does he overtly talk like one. He's a unique character and is treated as such. His theme even reflects that level of conflict within him. You hear the synthy tones and machine noises as started, and then the piano kicks in, representing Gamma's soul. It lets you know that there's more to this machine than meets the eye.
Don't believe me? Robotnik said it himself.
There was more to you than meets the eye.
See? He did say that.
Okay, I'm starting to bounce all over the place here, but you try reviewing 6 different character stories back to back to back. So yeah, Chaos and the Chow sing their song, Tikal talks to us about how the Chow need to be protected, and we end up back at the Egg Carrier, where Robot scolds all the robots for bringing him completely different frogs. That changes when he gets to us, and joyfully celebrates us being the only one to not fail him. With that, Robotnik teleports each E-Series robot away, with Delta giving us one final look. This horrifies Gamma, but you can't really tell that, so that's just my interpretation. It gets worse when Robotnik directs Gamma to a room to capture Amy's bird, but accidentally goes into the wrong one when the floor panel beneath him spins. He enters what I can only assume is a gruesome sight for a robot to see, as E101 Beta is basically there being dissected, disemboweled, and remade in a new image. So even though Beta made it on board, he was torn to pieces regardless, so did he really win? After Gamma is exposed to this horror, his takeaway is...
This is the wrong room.
Gamma's got so many fun lines in this game, he's truly a well-made character. Next we see what is essentially his turning point when he confronts Amy and asks for her bird. Now we can see from his perspective how the bird staring into him affects him. It was really just 3 hard-hitting events in a row that brought the soul inside him to the forefront. His friends were sent away to an unknown fate, he saw Beta being torn apart, and he had to go against this programming to protect this bird. Honestly, it really endears him to you because we legitimately see him suffer through so much trauma right away. He lets Amy escape as you'd expect, and then over the PA system, Robotnik gives him directions to collect the jet booster and meet him on the ship. The jet booster floats behind Gamma's head somehow and allows him to slowly descend to platform a bit more precisely by holding A after a jump. Once you had this, you're gonna wonder how you got this far without it, because you'll probably use it more than any other power-up in this game. Gamma meets Robotnik and the others on the ship and is commanded to get rid of Sonic and the rest. What I find weird is that Robotnik doesn't question why he had to be the one to get the bird and doesn't punish Gamma at all for letting Amy escape. Either way, this time after another pitiful character battle, it's Amy's turn to step in front of Gamma, which I also find weird because, like, all he's doing is holding his arm up to Sonic. Couldn't Sonic just get out of the way? It's not like he's seriously just gonna stand there and let himself get shot, right? Amy convinces Gamma that he can be good, as she knows he was before, and Gamma decides not to fight any longer. They all go separate ways. Gamma descends from the egg carrier and declares Robotnik as his enemy. His mission now becomes finding his robot brothers and, quote, saving them. Now what he means is that he wants to save the animals inside the robots, not the robots themselves. I was super confused as a kid because I didn't understand how blowing them to bits would be saving them in any way. So maybe they should have made that a bit more clear. Although they probably left it a bit ambiguous so the ending would hit harder. But we're not there yet. Before you go any further, you're going to want to go to the egg carrier crash site because in the room opposite the ammunition room, you can now collect another power-up. This is the laser blaster, which creates a blast radius for targets you destroy. It also feels like you fire a bit faster, so it's recommended that you collect it right away. Gamma then makes his way to Windy Valley, which again is just the first part of Sonic's level, but there's a bit more to it, and it's fleshed out substantially more, so I think it's a fun stage. Just watch you don't shoot the bridges out before you cross them, an easy way to die that. Then at the end of the stage, we face off with E103 Delta. Pretty much just another fight with Beta like before, so it falls flat on being something all that interesting. Next up is when things start to not make sense. You see, at this point, we shouldn't be able to access Angel Island at all. It should be in the sky, but the developers had an oversight here when they made Gamma's next stage be Red Mountain. It logically shouldn't be possible for this to be Gamma's stage, but this is where E104 Epsilon is, so he must shoot the monkey and press on. I actually enjoy this stage a decent amount because we can explore more of the volcanic caverns of Red Mountain. We go through more of Sonic's area, but I think they efficiently make it work for Gamma here. After another easy boss fight, we now have 2 robots remaining, Zeta and Beta. Gamma thinks they must still be on board the egg carrier, so now we must go back to the crash site. At the crash site, thankfully we cannot go through the sky deck, so we listen to a funky piece of music, as Gamma tells us to head to the hot shelter, his last level. I have a love-hate relationship with this stage as Gamma. I definitely think that this is the best hot shelter stage with a unique train car sequence, and the loads of areas made solely for him. Plus in this level, you really gotta work fast because time is not on your side here. In addition, there's some sequences where you have to wait around, so you gotta account for that as well. There were many times as a kid where I would run out of time at the very end and would have to start over again. It can be frustrating, but the more I got used to it, the more I admired the challenge. I kinda wish all Gamma's levels were more like this, but maybe that would have alienated some. Still, at the end, we have a slightly more interesting boss fight against Zeta, now a strange abomination of a machine made up of Dreamcasts. After successfully beating Zeta, Gamma thinks he's the last E100 robot remaining. Before deciding what he must do, he sees the now upgraded E101 Beta Mark II flying around the ship, signaled by some truly badass music that plays off of Gamma's theme. In easily Gamma's best boss fight and one of the best in the game, this souped up robot takes us on full force, knocking our laser blasts away, sending tons of missiles at us at once, charging us head on, and even shooting a million Kamehamehas at us. The trick is to avoid his dash and shoot him in the back, but he's a slippery fucker, so make sure you do it quick. Otherwise, you'll be bombarded with attacks over and over again. If all Gamma's boss fights were more like this, I think his gameplay would be remembered more fondly. But alas, it's another example of wasted potential. People more likely remember Gamma's story for exactly that, the story. This is because when Beta finally goes down, Gamma goes to check on him and Beta fires one more close-range shot at Gamma before exploding. This releases a familiar bird out of Beta, the gray bird that was related to Amy's bird. Gamma and this bird go face to face as an image enters Gamma's brain. It's the image of the bird family huddled together, and the moment we all knew was coming coming has arrived. With his body mortally wounded, he succumbs to his injuries in a massive explosion to free the bird inside of him. This is set to an emotional rendition of his main theme, and can bring a tear to any gamer's eye if they're not careful. Even though this doesn't connect to the overall story about chaos, this part of the story commands your attention. Of a robot in search of humanity, finding out that he has free will and does whatever he can to help others in need once he is freed, even at the cost of his own life. Gamma is without a doubt one of the best characters ever written in a Sonic game, and it's such a dark story if you think about it. I applaud the developers for taking a risk and going there. Gamma as a character won't come back ever, even though his model is reused later as a common enemy in the next game. If we're talking solely on story, Gamma is probably the best, and you can argue a fully fleshed out game in the style could have worked as well. The gameplay just wasn't up to par with the main trio, and that's okay, because I still have a decent amount of fun here just being on the journey with Gamma. I'm thankful they didn't just abandon the style of gameplay, because it had potential, and I believe they would progress it in the next title to make it even better. But rest in peace, Gamma. We hardly knew ye.
After beating all those separate stories, we are now able to access the hidden last story of the game. Let's kick it, Supersonic style!
So now in the character selection screen, you are faced with a question mark that simply reads Supersonic. Selecting this gives us a rather weird sound. Yeah, whatever, I guess that's supersonic, sure. First we get a series of cutscenes, beginning with a reminder that Tails' plane still houses the last emerald at Big's house. Robotnik is then attacked by the surviving chaos in the jungle, going against the one who'd been controlling him up until this point. Then Angel Island falls from the sky again. Even though Knuckles fully recovered the Master Emerald, he suddenly spots the injured Robotnik near the edge of the island and is attacked by chaos off screen. Sonic relaxes in the Mystic Ruins and Tails slides over, telling him that Angel Island fell again.
Now wait, how did he not realize that with the huge mountainside just sitting beside him? Also, Sonic and Tails didn't care about it falling earlier in the game, so why do they care now?
Alright, let's just get to the end. I've already nitpicked long enough. So Sonic and Tails get to Knuckles on Angel Island. Knuckles reveals that Chaos is still alive and that he is in possession of 6 emeralds again. Before they can run off to find the last one, Robotnik makes his escape and Sonic is sent into our final flashback in the game. Now we finally get to see what happened here, somewhat. Tikal's father and his tribe arrive on the scene of the altar, attempting to steal the emeralds to use for war. Tikal begs them to stop, but he signals his men to run through, stampeding over her and the Chow in front. They get to the top of the altar and are confronted by Chaos, who uses the emeralds to wipe them all out, effectively dooming the Echidna civilization to extinction. Chaos then goes on a rampage off screen and is said to have destroyed the entire world. Before he can do any more, Tikal realizes that her grandmother's words were actually to be used to harness the power of the Master Emerald to neutralize the Chaos Emeralds. With these words spoken, the Emerald then seals Chaos and Tikal away inside of it, and the flashback ends. Then we get back to Sonic, who wakes up at the same place, to probably the most unintentionally funny scene in the entire game.
Good thing you're okay.
Seriously, what happened there?
This exemplifies a huge problem with this game, in that mouth movements make absolutely no sense to the lines being spoken. In fact, I'm not sure these mouth movements line up to anything because they're just the same stock movements for every character. The facial expressions look all goofy and make zero sense. The character models just look strange in some instances. Just look at Puppet Robotnik here. They were trying so hard to tell a solid story here, but what sets it back from being taken seriously is the movement of these characters aging like milk. It's probably the biggest reason for fans to want this game remade because these characters just look awful in dialogue. I've seen some of these scenes reanimated online with newer models that look fantastic. They honestly deserve way better than this. I can't even say that the time period was the issue because you already had other platformers like Crash and Gex during that time that animated dialogue so much better. The dialogue isn't much better itself, but it works fine for this game. Some voice actors give way better performances than others, but it's passable in my opinion. Now Sonic and Tails race to find the last emerald on the Tornado 2, but just as they reach it, Chaos grabs it first and now has acquired every emerald. It is time for one of the most insane things to happen in a Sonic game. This city filled with thousands of people is about to get its shit wrecked. A massive tidal wave wipes out all of Station Square, or at least it would have if the people weren't evacuated already in a matter of moments.
Come on, Sonic Team, have some balls. You literally just killed Gamma. Why can't you just kill some random NPCs?
Fatalities or not, this is an amazing scene to see that we've been building up to the whole game. Well, actually it would be if it didn't play during the intro of the game. Yeah, on your first time loading up this game, it literally shows you what happens in the end. Before you even see Chaos's first form, you see his perfect form. Look, I get wanting to have a cool intro scene, but you're giving away the entire story at the start. It's like the intro of Avengers Infinity War showing you the snap before seeing the rest of the film. Why did they choose to do this? Granted, the intro pumps me up like nothing else, but just animate a bit more scenes from the game and it can be just as good. We should not see perfect chaos right away. It makes the whole mural scene with Sonic pretty pointless. Although I will say, if you ignore some NPCs in the scene, I think it looks incredible for its time. I certainly wouldn't wouldn't have seen anything like this on an N64 at the time. And Perfect Chaos himself is such an amazing looking beast straight out of a Godzilla movie. I think all his forms up until now perfectly built up to this. I mean, there's a huge jump in power from 6 to 7, but you have to remember all the emeralds together allows for a massive amount of energy to be generated. When we go back to in-game graphics, Chaos kinda looks a bit derpy. It's jarring to say the least, but they tried the best with the hardware at the time to make him look as good as possible. I don't hate it. I think there are some angles that he looks better than others in, particularly when you truly grasp his size. Before we can even do anything to stop Chaos from destroying the world, Robotnik swoops in with his Egg Carrier 2, which he built specifically in case of something like this. Instantly, Chaos takes that Godzilla comparison to heart with a massive beam of atomic breath to send his new Egg Carrier crashing, and Robotnik flying off like he's in Team Rocket. Sonic is then confronted by the red ball of light, who he finally addresses by name, recognizing it as Tikal. With a white flash of light, Tikal materializes before him, revealing that both she and Chaos were trapped together in the Master Emerald, and that in order to stop him, he must be sealed away once more. Sonic interjects, stating that even if Chaos is sealed once more, it will not solve his problem. The rage inside of Chaos will never disappear. He'll be in turmoil forever. Pretty amazing how Sonic is such a good guy, he's able to have the empathy for this creature that could potentially wipe out civilization as he knows it. Chaos uses all the energy of the emeralds and sends them away. Thankfully, our heroes appear with the emeralds to bring them back to Sonic. Even Amy arrives with a bird, only it's not the same bird as usual. She actually arrives with the bird that was inside of Gamma, so in a way, all the characters are here. I really wonder what that interaction was like. Does Amy understand that that's Gamma? In any case, Tails states that Chaos only used the negative energy of the emeralds, and Sonic can still use its positive energy against Chaos. With that, the main theme plays and the crowd cheers him on as Sonic transforms into Super Sonic. In his first appearance in 3D in a mainline game, he looks so badass. They really nailed the design of Super Sonic here. In fact, at this game's release, I think it was the best he ever looked. In the earlier games, Sonic hair raises vertically upward more than outward. I don't dislike it in this style, but I think 3D allowed them to perfect it.
Anyways, we got a final boss to beat, so now it's time to open your heart.
That's right, because for the first time ever, we got a badass climactic final battle theme sung by Crush 40. I think they would only get better with the next game, but the song Open Your Heart is fantastic, and truly sets the stage for this intense battle. This is probably right up there with the Egg Viper for best boss battle in the game. There's so much to like about it. For one, you are super fast as Super Sonic, and he's very fun to control. It's a Sonic who flies instead of runs, as you make your way from a starting point all the way up to Chaos. He'll shoot you with fire, send tornadoes in your way, and use his Godzilla death ray to mess you up. You won't take damage, but it will heavily slow your momentum, which you do not want. This is because in order to hurt Perfect Chaos, you have to fly into him at such a great speed that you can make your way up his body into his brain. Afterwards, he will switch positions, and you must repeat the cycle at another starting point. If you're not fast enough, this will still happen without Chaos taking any damage. This means you must try to get him every single time, because sooner or later you're gonna run out of rings in the boss fight. And if your ring count hits 0, you gotta start all over. Honestly, I find this boss challenging. Some of these shots from Chaos are hard to dodge, especially when you're halfway through the fight and he turns up the heat. The music also changes, which is supposed to be more sinister. I would have preferred it if this started the fight and Open Your Heart kicked in during phase 2, or simply just stayed on the entire time, but it's fine. But man, this fight can be tough. You really gotta make sure you grab those rings, and sometimes it can be hard because you're also trying to maintain your speed. Chaos keeps coming with hit after hit, but I've got this. Come on, I'm almost there. Ugh, I'm running out of rings. Come on, Sonic. That's it. You got this. Yeah, wait, what?
How in the hell did that not work? I beat the boss, but I still died? It was literally loading the victory screen.
I've never seen this happen before. I don't know whether to call it a glitch or what, but I've come too far to stop now. Making sure I have enough rings now, I fly full speed into the beast and finally end this game. Yes, I did it. Woo! With Chaos neutralized, he appears much more docile. In fact, the Chow of this world appear and walk up to him, showing that they're still around to this day and care deeply for him. Tikal appears and says that they live in harmony with humans. And with that, Chaos is back to being happy. Tikal and Chaos then depart together into the afterlife.
But yeah, we still couldn't let any no-name civilians die.
After that, Robotnik watches on and Sonic gives chase, starting up a new adventure all over again. But not until Tails utters the most baffling line in the entire game.
All's well that ends well, right?
The city's been fucking destroyed!
Okay, I had to make that joke, but just know it's not original. It was made during the first Sonic Adventure playthrough I ever watched, which was a huge inspiration for me and this channel, so please check them out. Once a character's story is completed, you can play their stages back in trial mode, along with their boss fights and sub-games they can participate in. There's also missions you can do exclusive to the DX version. If you collect all emblems by completing every trial and mission, you'll unlock a Metal Sonic skin for Sonic's levels. I've never done this, but maybe I'll cross it off my bucket list one day. This is a good amount of stuff to give the game some replay value. I'm glad they put in some sort of reward for all that hard work. Some of that work also involves chow raising. You see, in every adventure field there exists a chow garden, where you can raise these cute little fellas as virtual pets. You can also find some rare eggs if you keep your eyes peeled in the hub world, so look out for those. You can feed these chow fruit that grow on trees, or you can buy them from the black market. Ew, what the fuck is that thing? You can also bring in the animals from the badniks you've destroyed, and the chow will absorb its essence and increase its stats. Increasing its stats will improve your chances of winning chow races, which must be completed at every difficulty in addition to everything I stated earlier in order to get the Metal Sonic skin. I never was a huge fan of chow raising in this game. Maybe it's because I already had the sequel where there was much more to do with it, but it's not bad here. It's a fun little distraction, and if you give the proper amount of care while you're playing the main story, you could probably progress far into it as you play the game. Also with emblems, you can unlock some Game Gear titles for every 20 you collect, so that's neat. Before we wrap things up, I gotta talk about this amazing soundtrack. I enjoy every character's main theme in some way, but there are some songs that have always stuck with me since I first turned this game on long ago. All the level themes fit their atmosphere, and even some less prominent tracks like the character battle themes kick some serious ass. I cannot say enough good things about this game's music. It's honestly perfect, except that one line in Amy's theme where they said they had to shave a sphinx, and also when Knuckles gets it on by himself. Overall, I'm a huge fan of Sonic Adventure DX. This game is integral to my increasing love of Sonic as I grew up. It introduced me to some of my favorite characters in the series like Gamma and Big. It grabbed me right away with its smooth controls and very fun levels. It's not a complete masterpiece, as there's just so much untapped potential. Sonic's story is nearly perfect from beginning to end, while Knuckles and Tails' stories are very fun but could have been even better. I love the plot in Gamma's story, but his levels were a bit hit and miss for me, but fun nonetheless. Amy's story is pretty weak all around, but I don't hate going through it just bores me a little. And Big shouldn't even be in this game. For what it is, it's fine. Completely harmless. Sonic Adventure DX is a great game, and even though I know in a lot of ways it hasn't aged well, I will always cherish it for what it did right. And to this day, it's a 3D Sonic game I'll go back to and play for years to come.
And that was my review of Sonic Adventure DX. I hope you enjoyed it, and I don't understand, that red ball is still here? We just beat Chaos! Come on!
Haha, that guy got hit in the head with a coconut.
What the hell are you doing?
Oh shit. I mean, we must defeat Chaos. Yes, Chaos is very bad.
You didn't need to beat Chaos at all. You just wanted to come here and mooch off my stuff.
Oh, come on. What could ever make you say that?
Alright, that's it. You're getting out of my house.
Well, I guess the big cat's out of the bag now.
Hey, hey!
Krusty the Clown! Ah!
That's right, you thought you could get rid of me that easy, Jay Ruff? Well, now it's time for some good old-fashioned revenge.
The Master Emerald? You're not gonna...
The 7 emeralds are the servers. Chaos is power, enriched by the heart. The controller serves to unify the chaos. Now unify this piece of crap for all eternity. That'll teach him. Hey, you there! Thanks for watching this review. If you liked it, please subscribe for more and hit the bell as well to be notified of the next upload. Leave a like and comment what you think about Sonic Adventure. Share this with your friends. Take care and peace.
The whole time he keeps this fake, suave persona that is just the right kind of annoying. You can't help but be entertained by everything he does.
Rock crushes scissors, but paper covers rock, and scissors cuts paper. Kid, we have a conundrum.
So in this episode, the crew is sent to deliver oversized scissors to the new Dupe headquarters to cut the ceremonial ribbon. Zap, distracted by his lust for Leela, wrongfully arrests the crew, taking the scissors with him. When the time comes for Zap to cut the ribbon, instead of being there to cut it with the scissors, he makes the decision to cut it with a laser from his ship, causing the brand new station to explode.
Whoopsie daisy.
Disgraced by his failure, Zap is dishonorably discharged along with his assistant Kip, and they are thrust into the city of New York as homeless, jobless bums. That is until Zap turns to Leela for help.